Your journey has been an interesting one up to here. You've questioned so much more than those around you. You've even questioned yourself as to how you could have grown into these thoughts. Am I crazy? When did I begin to think differently? Why do people in general appear so limited in their thought process? Rest assured, you are not alone. The world is slowly waking up to what you already know inside, yet can't quite verbalize. Welcome to the Spiritual Dope Podcast, the show that answers the questions you never even knew to ask, but needed the answers to. Questions about you, this world, the people in it. Most importantly, how do I proceed now moving forward? We don't claim to have all the answers, but we sure do love living in the question. Time for another hit of Spiritual Dope with your host, Brandon Henley. Let's get right into today's episode.
Hey there, Spiritual Dope. We are on here with Keith Gilmore. This is round 2. We're giving it a second shot. Keith is a writer, speaker, and coach. He writes primarily on culture, ethics, psychology, spirituality, philosophy, and psychedelics. He's the co-founder of Texture Life Coaching and one of the top-ranked psychedelic integration coaching programs in the country. Keith, so glad that you could join us today.
Happy to be here, Brandon.
He had an amazing answer earlier, so we're going to see if he can double down on it when we were trying on a different platform. You know, the question being that we are all source speaks through us. It's going to be like an amazing connection through Keith from source to you, and it can only happen like this one time. Keith, what is that? What is that that's coming through you today?
Yeah, so I'm looking to talk about the psychedelic renaissance that's happening right now. And what I see is happening is that these things, the psychedelics, are reemerging into the cultural consciousness in a way that is speaking to exactly what we need to hear at this time in our lives, where things are so disconnected, people are so islanded. There is so much strife and tension. There's a feeling of kind of being lost at sea that people are largely experiencing. And it's because of a lot of things, but because our world, there's so much going on, there's so much information, there's so much confusion. And I believe the psychedelics are re-emerging right now, right on time, to help us to make sense of what's going on, to help us to reconnect to one another as human beings, and to help us to allow us to kind of see what we're not seeing right now.
That's cool. So what do you think that we're not seeing right now? What's like one of those things that we are not seeing right now that psychedelics allow us to see?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, fundamentally, that thing is we are not seeing one another as our brother and sister undergoing this journey as human beings, arm in arm together, facing the unknown together. And we're seeing, because of, again, a lot of reasons, but because of the state that our culture is in, we're seeing one another as, enemy, or maybe a tentative ally, or just as people who we can't trust, we can't put our faith in as someone who's going to stand side by side with me to face what's coming, face, the continued craziness that's unfolding in the world.
So, I mean, it's I guess eliminating some barriers that we've put up is what I'm hearing, right? And it's allowing us to connect and bond at a certain level that we're not seeing available to us at this point in time. And just establishing some type of trust link to experience this human condition together. Is that what I'm kind of hearing you say?
Well said, yeah. And I would add to that just that it allows us to have that trust link with ourselves too, because the psychedelic experience allows us to see ourselves without all of the trappings of culture, without all of these lenses through which we're viewing ourselves, and really dig into like, okay, this is what's going on with me. This is the source of, my issues right now. It gives you this sight into yourself that with compassion and with generosity, you're able to see kind of what's really going on with you, so that each of us can carry that out into the world, and through our own personal transformation, the shifting of the tides begin to happen.
So, you know, from personal and past experience, been a long time, but it's kind of like it's like you're saying, there's no there's no hiding from yourself, right? There's no way, you know, which I think you can, which is easy to happen with drinking, with alcohol, with other substances, right? Where you can shut off these pieces of yourself very easily and escape, right? Whereas with these psychedelics, like you're saying, like you're fully exposed, right? You're fully exposed. And I think that what you're saying is really important too, right? You've got to have someone there, or there has to be this kind of this compassionate setting, right? I think on your site too, you mentioned, and what we're going to jump to that in a minute, but like, because there's the potential for this thing to go sideways real fast and do some damage. Yeah, no worse than any other mental damage that we can experience, right? But like, it can certainly be a damaging experience if you don't have that space created for yourself, and you don't have some of the things that you talked about, like on your site, with going in there with a good intention, with having almost a game plan, all right? But like, what are we gonna do here today? How's this whole thing gonna go down, right? So I appreciate how you've illustrated again that idea that full exposure to yourself, you're like, I didn't know that was even still here, type of thing happening, right? So let's talk a little bit about, you know, Texture Life Coaching and how you ended up where you are today. What brought you into coaching? What brought you into spirituality? What brought you into the whole psychedelic realm, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. So my personal journey, my personal spiritual journey, I kind of, in my teens and early 20s, I kind of had this approach to life and to my perspective of religion, my perspective of spirituality, where I was just kind of anti that, what I thought that had to offer, because I saw kind of the ways that people could be and were being hindered or harmed by religion. And really, in reflection, I think what I was bristling against was more like strict dogma, whereas the religions that utilize psychedelics in their ceremonies and just in the kind of texture of their religious experiences, it's more of this embodied feeling of, I am going through this, and like you're mentioning, I'm in this container of support, but it's not just, here is a litany of rules you need to follow. It's, here's this experience, you are traveling through it, you're experiencing it, and it's embodied that way. It's not just something written in a book, which, you know, as I've grown, as I've developed my own relationship with spirituality, I am able to see value in the teachings of all religions. But kind of my, you know, crowbar in the door, let's say, to the spiritual dimension was initially through reading and connecting with the teachings of the Buddha, and then through discovering psychedelics. And that was just kind of the dynamite blast opening the hatch. And that led me to realizing that I needed to be working in the domain of psychedelics, helping people to navigate these experiences, helping people to figure out how to approach them, how to bring something back with them that they can utilize in their continued self-understanding. So it's something that is very important to my own personal journey, as well as how I see things unfolding in the world. I see this as a method for, like you mentioned earlier, the idea of source, for connecting to source, for connecting to the ineffable in a way that's embodied, that's not just someone telling you something, it's you experiencing something. And I think that alone has a lot of transformative potential.
For sure. You used the word that I'm a big fan of myself earlier, numinous, right? There's this feeling of numinous. I know I've shared it with my audience, but like, what's that feeling mean to you? Like when you say this feeling of numinous, and describe, I think, a little bit of your way of helping people integrate this experience into their everyday. I wrote down doldrum life, like, because right, you go through this experience, and you're like, wow, and you're like, this is what life is supposed to be like, and then you're like, I gotta be at work at like 9, dude. You know, it's just, I mean, you know, and sometimes it's a real challenge to go back into the container, like a different container. Right here, you are in this container, support and like full mind expansion, and you know, I'm guessing like an area of like acceptance and support, and there's like this release probably that the your clients you're feeling, right? And then they've got to go back into the dungeon. So how do you help them navigate that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's well put. And I think that there's a few things there. One, the experience of the numinous, of the ineffable, of that which you can't speak of because there's no words for. It feels like you're connecting to something that is just so much greater than yourself. And then as you're describing, you come back from that experience and you go back into the environment that you were previously living in, the same apartment with the same pile of clothes in the corner, the same cubicle at your office with the same, you know, person who you work next to who gets on your nerves, and so on and so forth. And that creates this dissonance, or it doesn't have to, which is why I do this work, which is helping people to figure out how to integrate the experience. So by integration, we just mean, you know, kind of weaving it into the fabric of their life. So it's not this, okay, I had this crazy wild experience that is over here, and then my life is over here. And it's just, how do I keep both of these things in my mind? It's actually bringing them together so that the lessons you may have learned, the understandings you may have derived, the memories you may have unearthed, whatever it may be, the actions you feel like you need to take, whatever it may be, you bring those in and again, embody them so that you can go out into the world and bring that higher understanding, bring that feeling of connection to something that's greater than myself, and go out and live in such a way that you're kind of communicating through your actions, through your being, to everyone around you, that feeling of the numinous, that there's something more here. And I'm, through doing this work on myself, I'm healing myself so that I can go out into the world and kind of be an agent of healing. So it's really helping people to take the experience and help them to live from that higher place that they were touching on. So it's not merely going back to the cubicle and nothing changing. Maybe you go back to the cubicle and you actually understand this person who gets on your nerves better. And so you can, you know, build a relationship or work on something in yourself that's pointing to, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah, I love the idea of weaving it into the fabric of their lives, as well as, like you said, there can be this dissonance, right? And trying to help them to um, come back and bring that with them in the idea that they are this agent of healing, like you're saying. The the one thing that I think that is a challenge for the spiritual community that I've seen is there's this whole idea of let's get rid of the ego, right? But then there's also this other terminology of like, well, I'm my higher self right now, so you guys can all go fuck yourselves, right? Like, I mean, I'm good over here, bro. Like, I've reached a plateau and you're all beneath me, right? So I mean, how do we soften that? How do we change like how that comes across? How have you been able to do that in your practice?
Yeah, that can be a tricky thing where you have this experience of, you can call it God or connecting with God, and then some people will come back and internalize that and say, oh, I must be God. And that's an extreme way of putting it, but this is, I think, a potential pitfall. And honestly, I think that the way to address that is like anything, to approach the experience with a curious humility. So, I could have a psychedelic experience, and get all these major downloads and feel like I understand how things work and I need to go out and tell the world. And that's, in that state, again, it's an ecstatic state, so you're excused for acting, for thinking however you may be thinking or acting. But then to take that and to say, I know better than you, I'm gonna be up here on this cloud and look down on you, that's, I would say that is actually a result of not integrating the experience, or not integrating it properly.
For sure, for sure. So, let's say again, let's say I come to you for a session, right? What's that going to look like? Walk me through the approach and what I could expect by having this experience with you.
Yeah. So, I recently started working with a client, and he let me know that, hey, I'm going to this ayahuasca ceremony in 3 weeks, and I want to be prepared. I did one a few years ago and didn't have any integration. And so I don't feel like I got as much out of that, or brought as much out of that as I could have. And so for me, that's right there, that's a lot of information to work with. Okay, this retreat is coming up soon, within the next 3 weeks. There is experience in the past that you've had, and you recognize that there was maybe a way you could have approached that where you would have gotten more from it. And so from there, it's me kind of inquiring of, well, what is your intention in doing this? Why are you doing this? And I think that's a big part of the integration process, that, again, people can think of integration as, this is something that happens afterwards once I come down. But ideally, it's kind of enveloping the whole experience, and you're kind of preloading it as well, and having clear intentions for why you're going to undertake this journey is extremely helpful, because that can kind of guide the whole thing. And it can be anything. It can be, I want to see where I'm going wrong in my relationship. I want to understand something from my past. I want to work through trauma that I have. It can just be as kind of broad as, I want to see what I'm not seeing right now, what's holding me back. But going in with that intention that kind of plants a seed. And over the next few weeks up to the journey, and then within the journey itself, especially, you're kind of growing this tree that will hopefully bear fruit. And I like to tell people, which, it's not my idea, but that intentions are helpful and good and even important, but expectations are not helpful and may actually hinder you. So to go in and say, I'm gonna heal this particular trauma that happened when I was 10 years old. And you go in and maybe the experience is confusing, or maybe, you find out that there's way more work to be done. And so you come out of it and maybe you think, well, why did I just do that? I didn't get what I wanted. Because I believe you're going to get what you need to see, not necessarily what you want to happen.
For sure. I mean, going into it with the intention, I think that's super important, right? The idea is, you called it a seed, and I love I'm an Abraham Hicks fan. I haven't listened to her for a little bit, but she calls it kind of like pre-paving, right? Go ahead and clear the pathway. You're like, this is where I plan to go. I'm just setting the intention, and that's going to be my direction. And to release those expectations, super important. If you go in there and you're so hyper focused on this thing that you want to have happen, and it's not happening for you, that can be, that can be something that you're attached to as you're going through it. And
Right.
We all know Buddha said, don't do that. We all know that attachment is the source of suffering. So, and to your point, what is necessary for you to see will present itself. I'm gonna go hit and miss on that one, just with the idea that you surround yourself with people that are supportive, right? Make sure, would you talk a little bit about making sure that you're in the right mental state, and like, hey, if you've had a really shitty run up to this, maybe that's a bad idea, right? Like maybe you're not in the right mental state for this now. Have you had that happen? Talk to me a little bit about how you handle somebody like that, or just making sure that they are ready for this.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And the classical...
But don't ask me how I know.
I won't. The classical wisdom is, of course, set and setting, which is your mindset going into it and the setting in which the experience is going to happen. And so, to your point, what you're bringing up, if you're in a state of chaos in your life, your wife just left you, you just got fired, or whatever it may be, that may be an ideal time for a journey, but it may not be. It may be that you don't have 2 feet on the ground. And so you might enter this space and, it could just kind of, create a really tough time for you. So going in, approaching it, again, I like to think of it as kind of curious humility, where I'm going in curious about what may happen, rather than like, I need to fix this right now. I'm going to turn to this thing that I've heard cures depression, that I've heard, heals people. So I'm just going to jump into this, when really it's much more nuanced than that. And it's quite complicated. And so having the right mindset, which, I think can be cultivated by any number of ways, through having a coach, or through a meditation practice, or through working with a therapist, or just knowing yourself, listening to yourself, and hearing that internal voice say, I'm ready. And then the setting piece is, there's a reason that historically in the kind of indigenous practices, these experiences are had in a ceremony. And because a ceremony, there's someone to lead the ceremony, a shamanic type person that understands the domain and the terrain. There's other people there to support you. There's this feeling that I'm participating in something greater than myself. So this day and age, maybe that's not necessarily accessible to you. There are, of course, ayahuasca retreats you can go to, and there are various kind of underground workers guides or sitters who will sit with you and, again, understand the terrain, understand what to do if things get hard for you. But even just having a friend who has a little experience sit for you while you're going through this, just so you know, okay, I'm in a place that is safe. My doors are locked. There's not going to be any surprises. My phone is off. I don't have to worry about anything logistical because I have this person here that can refill my water bottle, or that can even, give me a hug if I'm having a really tough time, or whatever it may be. But again, creating that container so that it's not just you flying out in space. And it's maybe unfortunate that a lot of people, their first experience of psychedelics is when they're really young, and maybe it's in a chaotic space like a music festival, and there's people drinking and chaos and all of this around them. And some people, I don't knock any particular way of approaching these things, as long as it's done with attention and care. But I think a lot of people tend to get into bad situations because their environment is not controlled. It's too chaotic. So just having the container, again, the feeling of safety and knowing that there's not going to be any surprises, is that alone is invaluable.
100%. Yeah, nothing you're saying here that I disagree with. I'm not the specialist, so the idea though that I love. So I mean, I'm gonna just kind of roll it back a little bit. When you've got like this indigenous setting, right? You've got I'll call him like a grand master or spiritual leader, right? That is standing there in front of you. That alone is going to bring a whole new level to your experience. Being there with somebody that is experienced, that is completely tied into this ritual. It's quite literally in their blood, and I mean, I call it like a collective, that community around there to support what you're going through, and I think that's super important. I think that's really awesome that you're creating this space so that somebody's first experience. I think a couple of things, like when you're younger, I don't know that you've really got the capability to take what you're given in that experience to the level that you're delivering, right? To make it a useful exercise, to be honest with you, right? Like, I mean, I do have a question though. Is there, like, do you have a certain level of experience that you suggest with the people that you work with, or is it you'll take somebody on this would be their first time?
Yeah, to me, it doesn't matter, as long as, again, as long as you're approaching it with the proper care and respect that I think it deserves. It doesn't matter if you have no idea, you maybe just read Michael Pollan's book and you're curious, or if you've sat in 100 ayahuasca circles.
Should I be reading Michael's book?
I mean, I think it's a good primer to understanding the psychedelic renaissance and some history. Yeah.
As a recommendation. Okay. Where, Is this something that you offer in person only, or what is, who should be reaching out to you? Like, who should be contacting you? Who's your ideal client?
Yeah, again, anyone who's curious humility again, or yeah, anybody who is curious and wants to take it seriously, take the prospect of their own healing, of becoming more in tune with their higher self, of understanding more of what they should be doing or how they should be acting in the world, or wanting to address certain things that they feel like are holding them back. But yeah, since the COVID situation, all of my coaching has been done remotely anyway. So yeah,
You guys are doing things different over there in Oregon,
yeah.
So, if I was to get all markety on you, right? Like if I was some marketing coach and I asked you for like the elevator pitch, what would that be? Do you have one?
An elevator pitch for the integration coaching?
That's right.
I don't have one, but I could throw one together.
Yeah, I'm just curious, right? Like, I mean, because it for me, I get it, man, right? Like I've been there, I've been through it, and I get it. But for the person that hasn't been, like, it can be a challenge because sometimes it's so ethereal, right? And they want to grasp it, and it's just right outside their grasp, right? But so, what would you say your specialty is with this, right? Like in terms of the challenges that people are facing, or is your specialty just to be there as a guide to help them get through this experience? And I liken psychedelics to kind of like the rotor rooter of the mind, or that door you've been trying to kick down but you haven't been able to, and all of a sudden it's like, pow, there it is, right? And some of it's like you were saying earlier, it's not even that thing you thought you needed. It's this other thing that's way over here you haven't even considered. It's been fucking with you for your entire life, and boom, there it is. It's opened up. They've got you there with them, and they're able to resolve this thing. Would that be a session that I might have with you?
Perhaps. I mean, I like the rotor rooter of the mind idea. Bill Hicks, the comedian, used to call it squeegeeing your third eye. But yeah, I would say my pitch to people would be, how are you feeling? Do you feel like the world is holding you properly? Do you feel like your real needs are being attended to? Do you feel like you're being seen? Do you feel like you're being understood? Or do you feel like you're kind of just grasping or trying to, keep your head from bobbing underwater? Or we live in this world that there's so much chaos, so much confusion, and so much novelty. There's more and more crazy stuff happening every day, and will continue to as we move forward. It's not going to slow down. So the psychedelic experience allows us to slow down, to reconnect with our true human selves. We live in a world where so many things divorce us from our humanness, and the psychedelics allow us to connect back with that and feel like, wow, I am a human being. It's something that you can't explain. It has to be experienced. But it allowing yourself to do that, to go through that, to me, it's very reassuring. And I think it's one of the reasons that I have such optimism about the future, about where we're heading. I feel like we are going to get it together, and that the reemergence on a mass popular cultural scale of the psychedelics is going to play a hugely important role in us getting it together.
100%. I love it. The self-study, or is this did you get some credentials on this, or just kind of again self-study? And I think that's really, to me, I think that's super important too. Like, self-education really speaks to your love of this space versus being like, well, I went and I took a 9-day seminar, and I don't know, you saying that's bad. So I mean, where are you with that in that space?
Yeah. So I'm kind of by nature, I'm the autodidact type. I like to teach myself, and especially with the psychedelics, you need to experience it yourself to get as much of a grasp as you can on what it is. But I also think it's important to learn from people who have knowledge, who have more experience than me, who have more understanding than me. So I'm constantly kind of taking courses and doing group work and just trying to learn and understand more, so that I can properly convey what needs to be conveyed, and to help people to go through the multiplicity of experiences that could come up.
No, 100%. That's it. And there's a lot of them. And so I think, again, I think the work that you're doing is really important. I think that it's pretty cool that, you're doing it. And I love the idea that, that there is this renaissance, right? And there you are, just kind of to capture it, right? To hold people and take them through it. Where, oh, you know what? Hold on a second. We almost forgot. This is like spiritual speed dating. So, basically the idea is, you're like bachelor number one, Keith. And like, so, if somebody's listening to this podcast today, they're basically looking for their next, spiritual date, and you could be it. So I'm going to ask a question or two and see what we got. How does one obtain true peace?
Well, my short answer is I wish I knew. And my long answer would be to follow your heart. Do what you know is right in your heart. Nobody else, you can't externalize it. No one else can tell you. No one else can show you how. They can kind of show you the door. They can kind of guide you on how to put one foot in front of the other, but you need to follow through with it. And I think that inner peace comes from congruence between your thinking, your beliefs, and your actions, your doing, your being in the world. And the only way to achieve that I found is to follow your heart, trust yourself, because only you know, and we can't give our trust away lightly, because it's, that's one of the most important things you have.
Bachelor number one, that's a solid answer. The idea to just a kind of a sub question, does your practice help someone to identify a way to follow their heart, would you say?
Yeah, I that's part and parcel of a lot of the work I do. Yeah.
I think you would say we are all one, so I'm not going to go with that one. What happens after you die, Bachelor number one? Don't fuck this up.
Right? Well, when I look out into the world, into the natural world, I see when a tree dies, it falls to the forest floor, and the matter, the energy, the stuff that makes it up begins being transferred to other things. Moss is growing, ferns start growing, mushrooms start growing. And so I look to that process where when a tree dies, nothing is lost. The physical standing thing is not there anymore, but it's not lost. What it is not lost. It's transformed. It's turned under, and new life emerges from it, in its place and from its matter. So I would say that perhaps something like that, but I don't think anything's lost.
I like it. I mean, it's kind of a return to life, right? You give them back, what you've already got, right? Everything recycles, right? I think that, we all know that, as much as we can believe science, right? That there's never any more or any less like mass and or energy at all times. So I like your idea of it just kind of goes back into where it came from.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Maybe.
Keith. Hey man, I had a blast. I really appreciate again, like I said, what you're doing. Where can somebody come find out more about what you're doing and potentially work with you?
Yeah, so you can catch me at texturecoaching.com. And if you're resonating with anything I'm saying, you can check out my writing, which is on keithgilmore.com.
Keith, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Brandon.